Hello, this is Aubrey Hicks, Executive Director of the Bedrosian Center at USC, and you are joining us for The Bigger Picture. It's a series where we interview scholars about how their research can make our communities better and more democratic. Today, I'm speaking with the team from Safe Communities Institute about the Lewis Registry, an exciting new project relating to good governance and the institution of policing, and I will let everyone get into that after we introduce everyone. So I'm going to go with the order of who joined first. So Lauren, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
I can. Thank you so much for having us today. I am doing a postdoc with the Safe Communities Institute with Dr. Earl Southers and working closely with Jesse Reed. We are working on the Lewis Registry currently, and you will hear more about that today, but I'm just really excited to be part of the team and excited about this very important project that we're working on today. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. And I realized my mistake right now when I realized that Errol and Jesse joined right at the same moment. So Errol, alphabetically, you're first. Errol, tell our listeners and viewers who you are.
Thank you. I'm Errol Southers. I'm a professor of the practice in National and Homeland Security in the Saul Price School of Public Policy. I'm director of the Safe Communities Institute and director of Homegrown Violent Extremism Studies. And delighted to be here. I've been on the faculty for 18 years. And I am really delighted that you were able to have this conversation about this really important social justice initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. And last and certainly not least, Jesse, tell our listeners and viewers who you are.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Aubrey, for having us. My name is Jessie Redd. I'm the Associate Director at the Safe Communities Institute, so I pretty much just support everything Dr. Southers does. So thank you, and it's like echoing what everyone else said, a pleasure to have this conversation.
Excellent. So the very first question is, what is the Lewis Registry?
Well, I'll start with the Lewis Registry, and we are honored to say it's named after Representative John Lewis. The acronym stands for Law Enforcement Work Inquiry System. It is a national database dedicated to documenting police officers who have been fired or resign in lieu of misconduct. And we intend to work with this so that it is a public-facing side of the registry, as well as a encrypted password access side of the registry for law enforcement, for deeper queries, and for us to be able to collect necessary data to be able to publish trends and patterns of misconduct.
What is the criteria for getting on the registry? Who gets put on the registry?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I'll just go through the list. It's misconduct that includes, obviously, excessive force, corruption, domestic violence, sexual assault, physical assault, harassment, perjury, hate group affiliation, which we can talk about later, falsifying a police report, and planting or destroying evidence.
Okay, so that is a lot. How will you gather that information?
So I want to give Jesse and Lauren a chance to chime in. So Jesse, go ahead, please.
So far, we've been gathering public information. So we do vet all of the information that we have been receiving. And we've been blessed to have a team already formed and basically volunteering their time to put together this database. So right now it's all public information from news sources. And we do have a database that we are currently putting together. I believe we have over 200 in that database already, but yes, it's all public information.
Okay. So are you working with journalists, or is it just your team sort of with Google alerts and active searches?
At the moment, it's our team with Google alerts and searches. We do work with some journalists as well, but the reason that we're going with open source public information is so that we don't compromise current or former officers' personal safety. We are very conscious of that. We're not going, we're being very careful to make sure that although local newspapers include a lot of interesting personal information, we're not going to be identifying those links to the officers that are on our site.
And just to add to that, we have not gone live yet, but we actually do have a lot of just citizens sending us news articles and people to add. So we do vet those as well. But yeah, we have been receiving a lot of people are, very passionate about this. So they just want to make sure that we are aware of everything.
It seems to me that this is not only important for community members, but it also seems important for other officers' safety. Do you feel that way as well?
We do. I'm a veteran of 3 different agencies at the municipal and federal level. And I still and will always consider policing to be a noble profession. It's not for everyone. And I believe that there are enough qualified people with the right values and integrity that should be in those professions. And I would feel more comfortable knowing that the vetting process includes excluding officers that have been fired from other agencies or resigned because of misconduct.
So how do you see this fitting into the larger social movement towards more accountability in policing? Are you wanting it to grow? Do you want this, you've got this public facing side. And I really see that as that part of the social justice movement. And then the encrypted side for law enforcement. How do you see that fitting into this larger movement for better governance in policing?
I'm going to let Dr. Brown weigh in first, and I'll follow her.
So I think I'll take the public side of it first. I think that what we are witnessing right now is, like you said, this outcry of a need for transparency, right, and for accountability in policing. And I think that what this registry offers is an opportunity for people to really get involved, to have access to information about officers that really are kind of classified as, as bad apples, right? Individuals who have participated in some type of behavior, conduct, and for that, they have been either terminated or they have resigned. And instead of allowing them to just kind of jump from department to department, we really want people to have an opportunity to look in the database and say, hey, Officer Green is here and we're concerned about that. And we want some answers as to why he has now been hired as part of our local community force, right? And so I think that that's really empowering and finally giving people an opportunity to have a voice and to be involved in this process as, we're thinking about the best ways to make communities safe, right? To ensure their safety.
And I'll follow up with the law enforcement side. I worked backgrounds when I was a police officer, and I wish I had a registry that gave me a national look with regards to who may have been fired. As you know, when people leave departments, that's one of those things that departments won't share. They'll just say the person left because they failed to meet our department's standards, quote unquote. I would have saved a lot of hours and a lot of my department's funding in finding out days or weeks later that this person had been terminated elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So the other thing we were going to be able to do is obviously collect more information on the, if you will, private side with law enforcement, so we can identify trends and patterns for misconduct. Is it a certain day of the week? Is it a certain shift they work? Is it a specialized detail like narcotics or gangs or canines or SWAT? So that we can give predictive indicator information to agencies to reduce the risk of officers in their department having problems. I would have loved to have been a chief that had enough data behind me to say that perhaps if you're assigned to this specialized detail, there's a 3-year max on your tenure of duty or a 4-year max on your tenure of duty, because data shows that after so many years, there could be issues. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we're going to be going with the information we're able to get from law enforcement.
That's fantastic. The other thing I want to get into a little bit more is when people resign. I think that's a really important story because, you're talking about fired or resign. So if an officer might be under investigation and they decide to resign, what happens to the investigation? Right? It's often stopped, right?
I'm glad you're bringing that up. California is one of the states that, along with others, have decided that those investigations will go on until they're fully adjudicated.
Okay.
That's a good
Even when the
step.
officer resigns.
Even when the officer resigns. And as you know, many officers resign for two reasons. They can say that they weren't terminated,
Right.
or they resign and retain their retirement.
Right.
And so we want to make sure, we've had some incidents recently where officers were in a shooting and resign before the chief fires them. Well, we want to see that investigation completed, and we want to make sure that they don't bounce to another department. That's a very good question and a very serious issue. So it's one of those things we want to be able to cover.
Do you see this playing a role in policymaking as well? You know, I'm thinking of the different states' rules for decertification.
I hate to be the one overshadowing this. I'm glad you asked that question, though. There are 5 states, including California, that you can be terminated and retain your certification. So that's a huge problem. And so that is one of the things we hope that will be able to influence policy, as well as there's another added issue of qualified immunity, where officers aren't held civilly or personally liable. I think one of the things that states should also do is make public the amount of settlements they have with people in their communities for millions of dollars that we never hear about, but we pay for. And I think that's very important.
So will that information also be in the database? No, not yet. Okay. Okay. What other policies do you think that this data can be used to address?
I think that the data can be used for hiring, for training purposes, right? And policies and procedures. I mean, there's so many implications for change for this data, right? Because it's going to give them a look at trends and evidence-based, right? So they can make evidence-based decisions about hiring, about training, and probably firing as well. So I think we are really excited about all the ways that this data can be used.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about, you know, the big case that is still on everyone's mind is the George Floyd or Chauvin case, right? So if Chauvin had been in this database, it seems clear that he might not have been put into a training position as well.
That's an interesting question because, you know, he had 18 complaints against him, but was never terminated.
Right.
So we have another, what we call poster officer in New Jersey right now that's on his 9th department. He actually has been fired by 3. He's still working. He's a problem.
Yeah.
And the reason people don't know about him is he hasn't killed anybody yet. That shouldn't be.
Right.
And so, and by the way, you know, once Chauvin got fired, he was in our database, and this officer in New Jersey is in our database.
Excellent. So we're talking about public, and you named all of the different types of reasons why someone might be in this, and this information will also be on the website, right? What is the threshold for inclusion? So you talked about vetting. What is that threshold for vetting someone and making sure that they go in the database?
So we're not going to make this decision in a vacuum.
Right.
Whether they're terminated or resigned or not, we're going to have a Lewis Advisory Board. So the lab is going to decide whether or not that termination should enter and whether or not the resignation should enter. Let me give you a classic case. We have a female officer who last summer, in your first year on the department, you're on probation. You can be released for any reason.
Right.
She posted a photograph of her cousin at a Black Lives Matter rally on Facebook. The department fired her. So that is a classic case where our Lewis Advisory Board would sit and decide, does she deserve to be in the Lewis registry for misconduct? And I would hope that they would say no. So that's one of those instances. Also keep in mind that 20% of the officers who are fired due to arbitration and other issues are rehired. So the Lewis Advisory Board will also determine whether or not, as a system of redress, to pull that person out of the Lewis registry, or should they remain? And so we aren't going to make, the 3 of us aren't going to make that decision. We'll have a board that will be comprised of numerous stakeholders, activists, community members, law enforcement, faith-based leaders, and they'll sit and help adjudicate this and make those decisions with us.
That sounds very time intensive. So I guess another question is, how will this work be supported? Is the board going to be volunteer? How is this going to support and be sustainable?
We're working through the board right now. We already have people trying to volunteer for a board that doesn't exist, so that's a good problem to have. I've served on a Citizen Police Complaint Commission before in another city. In the interest of full disclosure, it was Long Beach, who has the 5th largest police department in the state.
Right.
We were able to manage their caseload of complaints with 15 people every month. So with all due respect that we haven't finished reviewing the country but have over 200 officers, we don't think this is going to be extremely laborious with regards to our board members and their time commitment as we go forward, because it's a small population of officers, thank God. And we certainly wouldn't infringe on, if you will, the goodwill of people who are going to be volunteering. At this point, we're assuming that people will volunteer. We already have volunteers, so we think it's a good problem to have.
Do you see yourselves working with citizen oversight boards at all in the future?
I don't know the answer to that question. So I'm going to pass it to either Dr. Brown or Errol. I don't know if that's something that we have talked about. So
we haven't talked about it yet. We are collaborating, just so you know, there are a whole host of institutions in the country that have misconduct databases.
Mm-hmm.
We have communicated with the Center for Policing Equity.
Mm-hmm.
Their directors out of Yale. We have communicated with the Citizens United Against Police Brutality in Minnesota. In fact, they're on our supporters page. There's a database out of Alabama with a legislator who's a former police officer. So we're collaborating with them. At this point, the only lane that we're occupying are those officers who are fired or resigned.
Okay.
There's an interesting collection of databases out there that's putting together a lot of information on officers. So, we are an equal broker. We want to work with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have all the answers. We don't have the solution. We're willing to collaborate with anybody so we can contribute to changing the culture. And changing the culture means removing people that shouldn't be in the profession.
Right. It's interesting. There is a federal database as well. But my understanding, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, is that often police departments don't report officers who've been fired for cause.
That's correct. Or background investigators don't check it.
Mm-hmm.
There are human resources regulations. There are privacy regulations regarding police departments, and that's why you can go from one to another and not say you were fired and they won't find out.
Yeah.
And that is the reason we are using public and open source information. So we're not violating any of those rules or regulations or laws.
Okay. And is that also why there's the public facing side of the database?
Correct. As Jesse mentioned previously, if I live in a city and I would hope that citizens would push their departments to make their rosters public since they're paying for these officers.
Right.
And that name matches a name that's in the Lewis registry. As she mentioned, now it's time to have a conversation with the mayor and the chief to find out what's going on. And it's the litigation and liability that's attached to that. I mean, the average settlement for police misconduct, the average is $385,000 per incident. And it ranges as high to the double digits for tens of millions to even less than the $385,000. No community needs to or wants to pay that.
Right. And, I think when you're talking about, policing and budgeting, somebody quoted yesterday that, budgets are a moral issue, right? And, when we're talking about police budgets, we're not talking about those payouts. Those payouts come from a different source entirely. Is that correct? Or does it vary from state to city? And
I don't know how payouts work. I just know that ultimately my tax dollars are contributing.
Yeah. But for instance, in LA, they don't come out of the police budget. They come out of the the city lawyer and a different budget that they have for that. So when we're talking about the police budget being such a large portion of the budget, plus those things that we don't even see in the police budget.
And the concern we have in that regard is we should know how much their settlement is. And there was a recent study done by Yale that's evidence-based that documents that officers that have been fired go to other departments and have more severe problems.
Right. Because they didn't face accountability when they were fired in the first place. Okay, so let's just go back a little bit. How did you start this project? So what was I know that this is something that you've been thinking about for a long time, just in the nature of the work of Safe Communities Institute, and the nature of the work that you've done all your life, Dr. Suthers. What was the tipping point? What was the momentum for really starting this open database?
Well, I'll be brief. Coincidentally, we were having this conversation before George Floyd was murdered. And when that happened, that was the tipping point. Jesse and I had had these conversations before. I knew Dr. Brown from previous conversations and had an opportunity to bring her on board. And we have another sponsor named Maya Guez Salinas, Dr. Salinas, who's also a Trojan, said, hey, I'm going to work with you. And as a matter of fact, he is the designer of our logo and also one of the designers of our technology infrastructure. And we got together last June and said, we're going to do this. And we're going to try and see if we can make an announcement a year later after George Floyd was killed. And so here we are. It's not been easy.
No.
We had some naysayers. We had to make some really challenging decisions along the way with regards to sponsorship and relationships. We had people who felt we were being too aggressive and decided not to work with us. And we said, thank you. We can disagree on a lot of things, but we're going to do this. And so here we are.
Have you had much buy-in from the law enforcement community?
Believe it or not, that's been the easiest part. And it's all about relationships. As you mentioned, I've been around sworn in 40 years ago. So I know a few people across the country. And so the first thing I did is I reached out to the LA County Chiefs. Their president is a friend of mine, former LAPD officer. I reached out to of course, the Pac-12 chiefs, and you know where we are, University of California Systems chiefs, and all the heads of these organizations are people that I know. Then I reached out to the major cities chiefs, which is the 69th largest department in the United States, and he happens to be a supporter, and he's on our page. And we had conversations, and I've had conversations with chiefs across the country. We got them in conversations first. At the same time, we had conversations with activists because we didn't want to seem like even though we're doing what we're doing, didn't want to come across, especially with my background, as an organization that wasn't facing the real issue, which was removing them. So that's how this started. And the law enforcement piece has been easy. We've had 22 agencies volunteer for the pilot. I don't know what to tell you.
In California, across the country.
Right now, there are 22 across, just in California. We had a meeting with our design team yesterday, and they said, hey, you could broaden it a bit. We didn't know that. So they said, sure, we'll take more. So I have a conversation after this podcast with Chief Brackney, who's in Charlottesville, Virginia, who, by the way, is responsible for us adding affiliation with a hate group to our qualifiers, because that's what she's done in Charlottesville. It's now a disqualifier.
By the way, I'm a big fan of Chief Brackney. She's great. Sorry.
So
a little fangirling, sorry.
No, that's okay. So the pilot group is going to grow. We didn't know what they could handle, but they said, no, just as many groups, agencies that want to pilot, tell them that we'll do it.
Great.
And we're also speaking with Chief Leslie Ramirez today. She's over the Los Angeles School Police Department. So just to echo what Errol said, a lot of law enforcement support. And then onto the community side, we did a survey, I believe, winter of last year through YouGov. And I pulled up the stats on my phone, so I didn't mess it up. But 73% Republicans supported the registry, 90% Democrats, 76% independent. So a total of 80% overall do support this registry.
That's fantastic. It's good to hear that people actually can agree on something. It seems like, you know, accountability is one of the core strengths of a good governance. And, you know, when you're talking about policing and trust in communities right now, that accountability part is, you know, seems to be the biggest barrier to trust. So I would hope that more and more police departments would be joining and getting on board.
I just wanted to add, because I keep looking at the Price School in your background, and I can't help but say something about policy. Dr. Brown and I have had conversations with a number of state legislators. I would be remiss, and I'd get in a lot of trouble if I didn't say we've done this in collaboration with Representative Karen Bass, who, as you know, is a Trojan. And we are working with her office. There's a registry mentioned in the George Floyd Justice of Policing Act of 2021. And we hope that our registry will be it. And so we understood last June that legislation, both at the state and federal level, would run parallel to this as we were building it. We know we're building the plane as we're flying it. So we've been talking to legislators along the way, letting them know, as you're doing the legislation, we're building the database that can support and implement that piece. And so that's been happening now for the past 10, 11 months. And we're really, really proud of that. And again, we wouldn't be doing that if we weren't a policy school that, and I have to say this, ranked fourth in the country and recognized for what we do, and having a number of alums out there who are electeds who had meetings with us and support what we're doing.
So you talked about meeting with activists. Have you spoken with, you know, there's, and this might be a little bit touchy, but, you know, there is a USC abolitionist group, and there are, you know, a lot of calls for abolition right now. Have you spoken with, you know, Defend the Police and Black Lives Matter, folks that are sort of on that sort of left of the spectrum as well?
We have spoken with organizations about the Lewis Registry. We've not spoken to the Abolish folks about the registry because I'm on the board for the Department of Public Safety's advisory board. So my conversations with them have been about that. In the interest of full disclosure, we've not gotten to the registry because they want to abolish the board. So talking to them about the registry is kind of a moot point when I belong to a board that they don't want to exist. So we have not had that conversation, but they're crystal clear on what Lewis is, what we're going to do with it. And I have to remind students sometimes that think that we don't understand what they're trying to advance. They're a bit shocked when they find out that a former FBI agent and their professor took over a university building at an Ivy League school for 2 days while the National Guard stood outside. They just don't seem to think that we've been down that road before, and participated in something like that, risking my academic career. So I get it. And I like to share that so they understand that I hear them. I respect what they're doing, but this is nothing new, and the struggle continues.
And continues, yes. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about is that, and that's why I asked that question earlier, is that, you know, we're talking about, you know, accountability, not just for individual officers, but for the institution of policing, right? And, you know, I think that is often where, you know, these absolutes get things wrong, you know, that there is a difference between individuals and the institution, that sometimes the institution overrides, you know, everything, because you're playing within those rules. And so it seems to me that one of the things that a registry like this is, it can help with those, with the institutional change, the cultural change that you were talking about, policy changes that communities actually want. You know, if accountability is the thing that, you know, is broken right now, then you have to start somewhere to fix it. I guess I want to also say that, you know, I think that is also where the safety of officers comes in. You know, when you've got, and I know that your registry is really only dealing with fired and resigned, But folks like Chauvin, who've had 18 complaints, there is something that should have been flagged.
Well, I mean, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
And I'll say it, having been on the board of one of them, police unions are a problem. They are the problem.
Yeah.
And, unions typically defend an officer before they know what they even are accused of having done wrong.
Right.
And I can speak about Minneapolis because I know Minneapolis PD and I know their chief. And it's challenging. It's not like they didn't know. I often say this, police departments are like elementary school sometimes. If you go to elementary school and you ask a third grader who the bully is in the class, they don't have to think about it.
They know.
You go to a police department and ask them who their problem officers are, they don't have to go to the file. And so there's three things I often say about policing. They mirror their leadership. They do what they believe they can get away with. And organizations that investigate themselves don't find anything wrong.
And I would say that that is true across the board, not just in the institution of policing. I mean, that is, one of the bigger problems that, we face in a democratic country is that, institutions don't want to police themselves.
And I would add that, Chauvin wasn't an aberration, by the way. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in Minneapolis. Burning down the 3rd precinct was not an opportunity. That was a direct action on a precinct that had a whole collection of rogue officers, of which Chauvin was one of them. And anyone who does any research will find out who the other officers were there. And so the community took an opportunity, if you will, to level that department's building because those guys were there.
So this is going to be a tangent, and I'm sorry, but I also believe that there were some white supremacists involved in the burning down of the 3rd precinct, that it wasn't just, Black Lives Matter, that it was, complicated.
I'm not suggesting that it was Black Lives Matter. I'm just suggesting it was people who knew some of those officers who were in the 3rd precinct. I believe the first window broken on the AutoZone store in Minneapolis was, I remember what he looked like. And of course, when he threw the object through the window, shattering the window, everybody took the opportunity to go shopping and he walked away. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Black Lives Matter got blamed for it.
Right.
So your point is well taken.
Would you, so this is related to the Lewis Registry, but a broader question. Clearly we need more evidence-based policies in policing. Do we need more national policies in terms of data collection, in terms of investigating officers accused of wrongdoing, in terms of, I could go on, but do you think that we need more national standards, professional standards? Do we, there are national organizations for policing, but we don't really have many national standards for a lot of things.
You guys are killing me with me doing all the talking.
I know.
I'll say this, and then I'll punt to Dr. Brown, to Lauren and Jesse. We need an administration that believes that systemic racism exists in policing. That's the first step. Now we're there. We need an administration that believes that consent decrees work. The last 4 years, we went with 0 consent decrees, and in the previous administration, they had 15. Consent decrees, to the chagrin of law enforcement, are effective. We need a national standard. There's no reason why a chokehold should be okay in one state and not in another state. And by the way, the Minneapolis Police Department was reviewed by the Obama administration, and one of the outcomes, I do believe, was a settlement that discussed not placing a handcuffed prisoner on the ground in a prone position. So yes, we do need national standards. Human beings are who they are, police officers are who they are, and the state boundaries should not dictate what they can and can't do in the way, specifically as it relates to the use of force. And then I'll just punt to Jesse and Lauren.
So, as a social scientist, I'll answer your question and say, do we need more evidence-based policy on local and federal levels? Absolutely, right? Because you can't fix something you can't measure, right? So if you don't know the degree of the problem, it's impossible to create a policy to fix it. So yes, we definitely need it. I think there's a really great opportunity for California to take the lead on this, to be the model. And we hope that it will be one that the nation follows. There's no reason why we should not have a registry, right, that identifies individuals who have a pattern, a history of, not playing nice in the sandbox, of potentially hurting people, property, other things that could actually lead to taking someone's life. And we need to take a stop. We need to make efforts to stop that. And we're really hoping that this registry will help save lives.
And I agree, and I'm just going to echo the comments that Dr. Brown and Dr. Suthers made. We definitely need more accountability at the federal level. I think up until recent, like some states weren't even reporting hate crimes. And those were probably the states that had the most hate crimes. So it starts with the top down. And a lot of law enforcement agencies, they still abide by federal rules and regulations, even, if they're like in California or so. Yes, I do believe that we need more accountability.
And I think the connection is that once you have accountability, it builds trust. And I think that right now, there is this movement right on social media, and people are calling for accountability. But I think that the flip side is, as people want to trust, the people that are there to protect them. And right now, I think that trust has been broken, because when we turn on the television, right, or we go to social media, we see all these horrific stories of people's lives being taken. So I think that it's time to turn the corner. It's time to echo, right, the call for accountability, but also to answer with something that people can have hope in, to say, okay, we can build trust again. We can build back communities, right, and provide safe places for people to live. And that's what we all want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think I think there needs to be some kind of, maybe not apology, but just to even recognize, from the federal level. I know, President Biden has done an excellent job at realizing and knowing and stating that there is obviously something within law enforcement that needs to be revamped. But if we go back in time, police started as slave catchers. So I think there just needs to be more, I want to use a different word than transparency, but just recognizing that the United States of America may not have started off with the best practices, and let's talk about it and let's move forward. And I still think that's still kind of like a gray area that they tiptoe around. So again, going back to what Dr. Brown was saying, transparency leads to trust.
I think that's a really excellent point. I think it also goes to what Dr. Suthers said about acknowledging systemic racism within the system, and that it isn't necessarily that individual officers are racist, except that we have all been brought up within racist institutions. And it doesn't make us bad people. Once we learn, that's when we get to what do we do with that knowledge. If we continue those practices, then yeah, you're doing that knowingly. And so it's what you do with the knowledge. We're inundated with stories that tell us how to be in the world from the moment we're born. Then we get to an age where we can learn that there are consequences to our actions that affect other people. And what we do with that knowledge is the important thing. And it seems to me like this is a very first step towards policing, recognizing that as an institution, it has caused a lot of harm and has lost trust in communities. And that does not say that individual officers are all bad. Obviously, I'm looking at someone who's been in law enforcement for a long time. And, I always say, you're my hero. And I think, the heroes of our communities should be the folks who are the role models, and the role models take accountability for when they've done badly.
Exactly.
Well,
And sorry, Dr. Southers, also just wanted to add, at the Safe Communities Institute, we support law enforcement.
Right.
We work with law enforcement every day. So by any means, we're not saying that law enforcement is bad. Again, we know there are bad apples in every agency and department, but we run leadership programs here specifically for law enforcement, and I firsthand get to see some of the amazing officers and leaders that specifically in Southern California that we have, because I fortunately get to work with them every day. So I just wanted to make that clear. We do support law enforcement. We just want to do the right thing.
Which should be part of law enforcement, right? Go ahead.
the only thing I was going to add, and Aubrey, thank you for always the kind compliment. It's unfortunate that we live in a zero-sum world now. You say Black Lives Matter and somebody hears my life doesn't.
Right.
Or, you say, refund or defund refund the community or defund the police, and they hear, blue lives don't matter. That's unfortunate. And we live in this world of whataboutism. We, as Jessie mentioned, she runs all of our programs, and they're public safety programs. And we're giving them data, how we're focused on, say, for example, the extreme right wing, and they want to do whataboutism on Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And then you give them the data, supported mostly, my most incredible source is a Harvard study on the protest last summer, and they don't want to hear that. And it's really sad because they need to understand, as was said a couple of weeks ago, Derek Chauvin was on trial, not the law enforcement profession. However, having been in 3 agencies, I can tell you, we need more than a policy change. I mean, the running joke amongst many of my colleagues is police departments eat policy for breakfast. You've got to change the culture. Mm-hmm. There's a culture in law enforcement, and anybody who says it's not has never been there. I became a police officer because when things happened to me, we didn't have cell phones. And I often say, police misconduct hasn't gotten worse. Cell phone technology's just gotten better.
And social media allows you to share things instantaneously and
correct.
And from the side of a road.
Because you've known me for some time, I recruit officers to law enforcement every single day because I believe that if we want change, those young progressives who have these ideas and these values, they should be the ones taking care of their communities in the way of public safety and community care.
I think we're going to have to do Southland for real review at some point, Errol, because...
Okay.
I keep saying you need to watch Southland. Have you... Go ahead, Jessie.
I haven't seen that, but I had another suggestion. We recently held a panel discussion around the movie American Skin, and I would love to be on that panel discussion. It's an amazing movie. It's very realistic, and you hear from just both sides, law enforcement and the Black community, and it was just one of the best films I've seen in a while. So just wanted to throw that out there. And I did want to touch on something Dr. Southers said about accountability within law enforcement. Miss Carriel Horn, she spoke out basically against an injustice that she witnessed within her agency, and she was fired. So it starts within the department. She did the right thing and she was penalized for it. Fortunately, I believe they revisited that case, and I think they've tried to solve it. And I think, Errol, you have more details on it. But just to go back to the point that it's the culture in law enforcement.
I was going to say that, this, your registry is really targeting, on the ground, as we would say at the Price School, bureaucrats, our on the street officers who actually do a lot of the interacting with the public. And what you're talking about, Jessie, is this sort of middle management, upper management thing where, like in many fields, including our own, there are people that fail up. And, the registry isn't going to affect that, or will it? In some ways, I can see that, if a particular department keeps having folks put on this registry, that then the community will want to figure out, what's going on with the leadership that allows this to continually happen, and that is, like you said, I mean, leadership from the top is also part of the problem, and they tend not to be the names that we are associated with the wrongdoing.
Well, let me just add, I to your point, we've had a mass exodus of officers across the country, and especially it started, of course, after the George Floyd murder and continued after the Capitol insurrection. Well, when I see officers leave because they're concerned that they are going to be having issues later, in police work, that's called a clue. So it says to me that you shouldn't have been there in the first place, and you're going to leave Dodge before things get really hairy. So I have no problem with them leaving. They shouldn't have been there. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this, I often have to have this conversation with public safety people about the notion of affirmative action. Affirmative action is about access. So when I meet an officer who tells me his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather were cops, and now he's a police officer, he doesn't understand that that's affirmative action. We have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So, I come from the East Coast where Italians couldn't be police officers and Irish couldn't be cops.
Until then,
I'm sorry, Italians couldn't be police officers and Irish couldn't be firefighters.
Right.
That was affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to have that conversation too. But again, I'm back to the culture. Mm-hmm. And we have to, there's an article just written recently, which really gets to the point. I mean, I was in law enforcement when we thought the best thing in the world was recruiting veterans. Veterans are great if they have the right mindset to deal with people. I mean, they're coming from a culture where they're trained to kill people. Is that the best person to put in the community? You look at most sheriff's departments in the country where they spend 3 to 5 years of their first years on the job in the jail. And then you put them out and they have to make a traffic stop on somebody who's driving, a family van. Is that the best way to do it? So a lot of things that we've done traditionally, as you said earlier, as a model is not what we should think about in terms of the way it's done. And then the last thing I'll say is we spend a lot less time in the United States training our officers. Other countries spend months and years, and they're training people to interact with them, and those officers are unarmed. Mm-hmm. So the last thing I'll say to your point about funding, because Jesse and Lauren and I have had this conversation several times, with the exception of what just happened recently, which I think is an exception. Not excusing it, it's an exception. Why do most of these encounters with unarmed, usually people of color, happen with white male officers and not women? There's a lot of female officers out there who make a lot of arrests every day, and I've had female partners. They de-escalate differently. Why? They take people much larger and stronger than them to jail every day, and there's no fight and nobody gets killed. We need to examine that. There's something there that I think is evidence-based that perhaps should be a part of regular training for everyone.
Mm-hmm. I think the training issue is just really important because, as Earl said, our issues are different now. I mean, now we have but a lot of cities are experiencing, homelessness, right? Where people now are on the street, and we go back to training. Should an armed officer really be the one that shows up with their training to adequately assess the needs of this individual? So, I mean, I think that's one part of it. But again, I think there's a lot we can learn, right? From looking at trends, from looking at the data. What does it say about training? What does it say about who should actually be deployed to what type of situation? But most importantly, what does it say about people's track record on the force? What are they doing in community? How are they behaving when they arrive at a call? What's happening? And if they are, participating in something that we identify as a form of misconduct, right? Then people need to know.
Yeah. Just to go back to training, it seems that there's a lot of training about firearms and don't shoot training. And yet the stats show that that is a very, very small portion of the actual job. It also seems to me that that focus on shoot, don't shoot might also instill a culture of fear, that officers are more afraid for their lives than they possibly should be. And I think that does lead into this sense of, the community versus us, when really what communities want is to be a whole community, and that the police are part of the community, which I think goes back to what Dr. Brown said about transparency and accountability as well. Now, I feel like we've talked for a really long time. Is there something that I haven't asked you that I really should have? Is there something you that I've just totally missed? I'm sure there is.
Oh, I was just gonna add on to the training aspect and just throw out there. I know implicit bias is a huge topic, and obviously police respond differently when they respond to a call in Beverly Hills and they do in South Central. So unfortunately, there are some officers that don't think that they have an implicit bias problem, and those are probably the officers that we need to target. So that's the only point I wanted to add on.
I think that's a great point, Jesse, and it goes back to another project that you guys worked on with the Center for Social Innovation, this tendency to target neighborhoods and police certain neighborhoods because you're recording crime there, and so you go back to that neighborhood instead of policing the entire community. Ultimately, you see crime where you are. Speaking about Beverly Hills, so if you aren't deployed to Beverly Hills very often because for some reason there's no crime there, that's also going to enforce the implicit biases that you might have.
Right. And that project that you're referring to is our Neighborhood Data for Social Change project. And that is an excellent tool for the community. It's all laid out. Basically, it's another form of a database to where the community can form their own opinions around the data that they see. And those come straight from law enforcement agencies. And Caroline and Ellie and Peter have done a great job at pretty much, I believe they train the community at least once or twice a month. It's been online since COVID, but the community can sign up for free just to figure out how to use the database. But yes, that's an excellent point, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, and if you want to learn more, there's a conversation on our show page with Dr. Southers and Dr. Painter as well. To learn more about that. Again, a public database, which is, I just want to reiterate what a great thing, the ability for communities to take advantage of the data is so important, particularly when you're at a university that often results of research are kept within the academic community. I think it's really important that what you're doing has a real public access part to it. I think it's not only part of the philosophy of the project, but also part of what you want to do in the communities. So it's not just about policing, it's about the communities. So anything else that I've missed?
I want to thank you for doing this. It gives us no greater honor to have named and found the right acronym to have John Lewis as our icon, our mentor going forward. As he said, if you see something that's not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something about it. And that's where we are. I'm very proud of my personal professional history. I wouldn't change it for a second. but that time has come in my career, in my life, to do something about it. And I'm in a position to do something about it. And so that's where we are.
And I'll just echo Dr. Souther's thank you for having us on this podcast. And if anyone is interested in learning more, supporting the database, please reach out to us. Some of our supporters include Representative Bass and Governor Schwarzenegger and a few NFL players. And so we're trying to just broaden the scope and get support from everyone. We do play a bipartisan role, so I think that's a huge plus. And yeah, we're just looking to bridge that gap. So thank you, Aubrey, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm just really grateful to be a part of this team and to be working on this project. I think that, the implications for policy and for community, and at the end of the day, really just helping to build communities, safe communities, and save lives. And there's no greater honor than to be working on a project like this. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to share about what we're doing and where we're going in the future. And we welcome, people's support to partner with us to make sure that this comes to fruition.
And not looking for volunteers yet, but a call for volunteers will go out. I did raise my hand, just so you remember. But
Thank you, and we're happy to send you some Lewis merch if you just tell us where to send it.
So I just I want to say thank you. I think it's always really a pleasure to highlight work that we're doing at the Price School that is for the community and with the community. And, I think you've built into the data collection, you've built the community in there. I think in the surveys you've done, you've built the community there, not just law enforcement community, but the broader community. And I just really want to reiterate how important that public facing part of it, transparency, accountability, the two key parts of good governance. And it's about time that we have that in, policing is fortunately or unfortunately one of the ways most people interact with our government. And it's a heavy burden. And, we need to build trust again and do it right. And it's a start because, policing is only part of the criminal justice system. And, clearly we see that there are issues with prosecutions. There are issues with juries. There are issues with, our massive incarceration. And, starting with police who are the on-the-ground representatives of our government is just incredibly important. So I want to thank you all for the work that you're doing. And I'm super excited. And thank you so much for spending all of this time with me today. I really appreciate it. So I think... yeah, we're running out of time. So I just want to thank you again, Errol and Lauren and Jesse. I really, really appreciate all of the time. And thank you for our viewers, our listeners. Thank you for joining us with the bigger picture. So for links to some of the things that we've talked about today, please visit our show page, bedrosian.usc.edu/big picture. If you have any more questions for our speakers or topics you'd like us to cover, let us know. Check out our website, social media, email us, whatever floats your boat. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Subscribe to the Price channel on YouTube. Leave a review so that other people can find us. And until we catch up again, we hope that you take care of yourself and your neighbors. From all of us at the Bedrosian Center and Safe Communities, I want to say thank you.